Good afternoon. This is Claudette Milner, host of A Matter of Interpretation. Today my guest will be Kalimah Johnson. Kalimah Johnson. First, I want to take the opportunity to praise God and thank Him for His grace and His mercy. Kalimah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank God, who's the head of my life, for being here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. We are going to look at sexual assault today. This is the fourth series of a segment known as Violence Against Women. So we are so glad to have you here as our expert in this area. But I want to start back to your teen years because I always want to go back and then go to the present.
Sure.
Kalimah is now the founder and executive director of SASHA Center. She's the adjunct professor of social work at Marygrove College, and she is also a consultant for the Detroit Lions and the Detroit Pistons in areas of sexual abuse. Take us back.
All right, thank you. Well, one of the things I like to say is people always want to know why am I doing work related to violence against women, and in particular intimate partner violence, and even more specifically, why am I doing sexual assault work? Well, actually, I could go back a little before teenage years and tell you that I was a victim of sexual assault in my own family by a family member from the time I was 5 years old until I was about 9, which put me at risk. I didn't believe that my body belonged to me. I didn't believe I had a voice, and that put me in more situations even when I became a teenager. And so in my teenage years, I ended up being in a situation where I was sexually assaulted in the context of a date, and then sexually assaulted again later on by a boyfriend. But let me go back to that second sexual assault. That all happened around, I was 15, and I went out on a date with a guy I didn't know. And the reaction of the police and the reaction of my family, my mother was very supportive, but everybody else was like, well, you were just out there being fast, you had no business out there. And I fell into a spiral, a very self-defeating spiral. And to deal with the trauma and to deal with my feelings back then, I didn't even have the words to call it trauma, but to deal with the fear and to deal with the shame and the guilt and everything that I experienced as a result of that put me at risk for a whole lot of other stuff. So I was out there doing a lot. And I actually dropped out of high school. I went to I went to Cooley for like a semester while my sister was at Cass. And then I went to Redford when she went to Redford, but I didn't actually spend a week of time in school at all. I had used all my time going to arcades and getting high and running up and down the street, and I said I wanted to be a rapper, which I'm still very proud of that history because that put me around some real good people that got me on the right track. But one of the things my mom decided was that I wasn't really manifesting at home, so she thought I should go to Job Corps. So I dropped out of high school, and she said, you know, you got to do something. And I thank her for this every day. I lost my mother in 1998, but she was so instrumental in making sure that I got on the right path. She prayed for me every day, but she was active, you know, so she said, you got to go somewhere, and you got to figure out that, one, I'm not going to always be here for you to get you out of stuff. And in order for you to do that, you got to go out on your own. So she had me go to Job Corps in Grand Rapids, and it was life-changing for me. I was there for about a year, and I actually was able to get my GED, which I call now a good enough diploma. But I was able to get my GED. And I actually got a training in nursing, which I ended up not doing that. I ended up being a social worker, but long story. But at any rate, getting my GED and being able to come back home, my mother said, I can show you better than I can tell you. You need to go to college. And my sisters were actually doing very well in college. And I was like, well, I don't think that's my road. I don't think that's what I want to do. But my mom was like, I'm going to show you better than I can tell you. We both going to college. So the first time I ever went to college was at Highland Park Community College, and it was with my mother. So I took classes with her. But I knew that because of my life experiences that I needed to do this kind of work. And eventually, by the time I got to college at Wayne State, which I had to start at Wayne State in their community college program called the College of Lifelong Learning, because I wasn't what they would call a traditional student. So I wasn't able to just go right in because I didn't have a grade point average and all of that kind of stuff. But I majored in English. and then I majored in social work, and then I had to go to a field placement. And I said, well, that's like an internship, so you can practice what you learn in the classroom. And I was like, well, I think I want to be around kids, and I want to be around survivors of sexual assault, because those two populations scared me to death. That was my language then. But what I really was saying was I wanted to figure out how to integrate what happened to me as a child, and I wanted to figure out how to integrate what happened to me as a teenager, and how to take that and use it as a place of power to change lives. And so luckily I got a chance to be under the tutelage of Althea Grant, who was the executive director of the Rape Counseling Center in Detroit, which was founded in 1975. But by the time I got there, it was in the 90s. But she was still there, and Ruth Beverly, which also was one of my supervisors, served as really great mentors to me. And then there were other students who were there who were actively working in the anti-rape movement, who are now executive directors of their own program. Sue Coates from Turning Point was also an intern at that program, and she was a woman who taught me a lot about sexual assault and about not just the basics, but just why it's so important that we put voice to it, because our silence never protects us around these issues. And I learned a lot. I stayed with the police department. After I graduated, they hired me, and I stayed with them for 10 years, and I left in 2005. One of the reasons why I left in 2005 was also trauma related. I left in 2005 because I had heard as many stories as I could hear, and I needed to engage in some kind of self-care. But I knew I wasn't going to ever leave the work. I just needed to leave it in that context, because I had heard so many stories. Survivors have taught me so much. But the movement wouldn't let me quit, so I became a consultant to the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. I wrote a book that didn't have anything to do with sexual assault, but I continued to train, and I continued to work with agencies in the Michigan area and across the country on issues related to sexual assault and rape. And then I actually said, okay, I think I've learned enough. Let me see if I can teach something. So I applied for a job at Mary Grove, and I became an instructor there. And I also did some consulting work for about a year with another nonprofit in Detroit that's no longer around. It's called Serenity Services. But anyway, I can talk forever about like all of that stuff. But one thing I know for sure, Ms. Claudette, is that I'm very thankful for the experiences that I have. I think it gives me some sensibility around doing the work. It gives me passion and commitment to continue to try to service survivors, in particular those who've been sexually assaulted. So,
okay, I want to go back to the job with the Detroit Police. What was it exactly that you did?
I was an advocate for victims of crime. And in particular, I was an advocate for those who were victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. So a lot of people don't know this, but the Rape Counseling Center is a program that is within the Detroit Police Department. Now it's called the Victim Assistance Program, and they service more than just rape. They do domestic violence, they do homicide, they do all kinds of personal and intimate partner violence kinds of work. They're still around, they're still doing a great job. And I was with them advocating. So what my day would look like on any particular day is we would answer crisis calls. We carried a pager, and we would actually, our offices were inside of Detroit Receiving Hospital. And so any sexual assault case, or any domestic violence case for that matter, that came through the emergency room, social workers like myself would be assigned to meet with that survivor and make sure that we advocated and gave them all the information that they needed. And we would advocate for them all the way from making sure they had the right information about court proceedings and court dates, all the way up to making sure they got all their prophylactics and all their medications for what they needed as a result of being sexually assaulted, to just being a person, a listening ear, to hold their hand and to just be there for them. A lot of people don't know that that exists, but actually it does, and it has. Wayne County Safe has taken over a lot of that because of the issue we have with the rape kits in the city, but actually they're still there. So that's what I did, and I did it for 10 years. And I wouldn't look back on it. I mean, I learned so much from people who experienced this. They even helped me heal. And so doing this work actually is what I like to do to kind of make sure I'm okay too. Okay.
So what are the issues with the rape kit? Because you have victims that are raped, and what should they know? What should they ask? What should they expect?
I'm glad you brought that question up. I usually like to first preference that Wayne County SAFE and the Executive Director, Kim Hurst, has been working on this project diligently, and I always refer people back to her to answer questions specifically about the rape kits. But if you have been sexually assaulted in the city of Detroit and you know that a police report was taken and you know you've been to the doctor, there is a rape kit with your name and number on it. If you want information about what happened to it, you can call the prosecutor's office, or you can give our office a call and we can make sure that you get to the right people. But in particular, Kim Worthy has done an exceptional job of dealing with it. It has been bad news. The fact that we have over 11,000 kids that were not tested says a whole lot about what they think about rape in the city. But Kim Worthy, again, has been diligent about it, so much so that the government has given her a grant to make sure that whatever she did to address the issue is also going to be replicated by other prosecuting offices across the country. So that's the good news about that. But if you are a person that's been sexually assaulted and you need to know and you want to know, you can definitely call the prosecutor's office directly and find out. They have a whole system of how they have categorized them. Some of those kids weren't able to be tested because the evidence was just not good enough, or that it was destroyed, or there were some issues with it. But if it happened to you, I feel like you have a right to know, and I encourage people to call the prosecutor's office to find out if they want to know. But they don't have to do that by themselves. SASHA Center is a program that will assist with that and be a part of helping them figure that out. Although SASHA Center is not what I would consider a comprehensive program, what we do is we provide support group services to self-identified survivors of sexual assault, but we definitely know who they can contact if they want to really find out, and it's totally up to them. If some people feel, and I've heard survivors say, my sexual assault happened to me in 1991. I've moved on with my life. I've given my life to God. I've done some other things and I'm okay, so I don't really need to know. But then other people who feel like they should know, they should have a right to know what happened to their kids.
Okay. For those who feel like they've moved on, what I've found in interviewing individuals is that if you haven't gone through and done the work, if you haven't gone through the counseling, there's still bits and pieces of baggage that you have not been able to lay down, that you're still carrying into relationships, that you're still carrying as a protection mechanism. And I understand it's a protection mechanism, but so much of victims of domestic violence that don't deal with it, or sexual assault that don't deal with it, that situation comes back to haunt them because they haven't owned who they are at that point. And so when you don't own who you are, that you are a beautiful person, that you're created by God, that you're created in His image, that you know your worth because your Father owns everything and controls everything, then you make yourself more vulnerable to that next. So, I encourage people that have said to me that I've walked away from it but have not internally dealt with it, to seek some kind of assistance.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up because you do know that SASHA Center specifically concentrates on communities of color, and in particular we concentrate on African American women. Our orientation did not develop that way just out of the blue. It developed that way because of my own personal experiences of being a survivor, but also experiences of other Black women survivors. And one of the things that I know, culturally speaking, in our communities is that we are taught and we are reared to just forget about it, just bury it, just act like it didn't happen. You stay silent for the betterment of keeping our families together, our communities together. You don't snitch, you don't tell, and all of those things can cause damage in the long term. And one of the things I do know is that I've met so many survivors that tell me, I have been working so hard at trying to forget it and it's not working. That's because you'll never forget it, and that it'll always be a part of who you are. But your work, and I hear you talking about this, is integrating it into who we are as people and using it as a place of power to make change for others. And it's a lot of work. And when we first started doing groups, we put out a notice and we got like 13, 15 calls from women who says, I know somebody that needs to be in your group. I know somebody that needs to be in your group. We're like, well, have them call. And some of them called, some of them didn't. But we opened the doors, and wasn't nobody in there but me and the other facilitator. And we said, we got to go back. We got to go back to the drawing board. We got to put out another notice. The next time we put out another notice, we get 50 calls. I know somebody need to be in that group. I'm going to give her your number. I know. And we opened the doors, and nobody there. So the third time we said we were going to have a group, and 50 people called, we said, can you bring her? Can you sit with her? Can you support her through the 6 weeks? And let's do it together, because we know that that first step is so hard that she probably can't do it alone. And then when we got about 7 people in the room, right? And then when we define what sexual assault is, the person who brought her was like, oh, if that's how you're defining sexual assault, then I'm supposed to be here anyway, because that is me. And so we work very hard at trying to develop language, definitions, information, so that people can be informed that, one, that thing that happened to you is not normal. That thing that happened to you was not right. That thing that happened to you was not your fault. That thing that happened to you is something that you can do something about, but you're not going to be able to forget it. And to be able to recognize how beautiful you are, how divine you are in the way that you were made, how talented you are, how excited you are about doing particular things, are all the things that we tap into and explore around helping women and men too survive sexual assault. And there's one thing, if I don't say anything else, Claudette, is that we as a people, we as women of color, in particular black women, deserve healing. It's our right to have. We don't have to take things to our grave. We don't ask people to come in the door blazing like, tell us your whole story today. It takes time, to unfold. And so we don't even ask people to disclose when they come into the groups. They can just kind of process it and figure it out on their own, in their own way, in their own language. What we do know is that we do hold survivors accountable for dignity and respect of each other, of themselves. We do hold them accountable for making sure that they work on not blaming themselves for what happened. And we actually engage in using alternative practices, from meditation to prayer to Reiki to crystals to using and talking about water and walking and eating right and exercising. And we talk about hair, and we talk about skin tone and complexion, because all of that has an impact on how we heal.
It also has an impact on how we interact.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, victims are survivors. I'm going to call them survivors.
You know what? I tend to call them people who've experienced sexual assault, and I let them tell me what they are.
Right.
Because they could be something else as the day changed. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it could be different every day. But yes, victims who are survivors or thriving, or those who've experienced rape and sexual assault, and then they tell us.
Yeah, and then you have what I find sometimes they'll play the one-up game. Yeah. Well, my situation is not as bad because this person's situation seems so much worse. And I hear that sometimes when people watch the shows, they'll say, "Oh no, that's not me, because I did not experience." If you experience verbal abuse, I didn't experience anybody hitting me, and yet your psyche was totally destroyed by verbal abuse. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times it takes group interaction to be able to identify. Sure. It's like those little surveys that you take that you identify, how many times you've been promiscuous or whatever.
We spend a lot of time with our groups talking about empathy. Empathy is being able to see someone's or identify the feelings that someone may have, even though you've never experienced it. We spend a lot of time doing that, because one of the things that I've been challenged about, because this is not traditional practice, is that we have survivors of sexual assault, of many different kinds of sexual assault, in the same room. Sometimes that's different age ranges. Sometimes it's just whether or not you were sexually assaulted by a family member or in the context of a date or by a stranger. We'll have them all in a room together. And one of my main reasons for doing that is that in our community we're so silent. We can't just say, we don't have the luxury of saying all women who've just been date raped come to this group. We just say, if you identify with ever being sexually molested or assaulted in a way where you did not consent to it, come and let's sit down and talk, and let's figure out what makes you special and what makes her special. And we celebrate all kinds of people and all kinds of experiences, and we embrace the stories that people bring to us. I think it's extremely important to engage our communities who need and are in seek of healing, the opportunity to tell their story in their own way without pathologizing them, because too often we do that and we're so judgmental. And if we could just, take that off, because at the SASHA Center, we might have a survivor who participates in a 6-week group and shows such leadership skills that we train her to also work with a person who may be an LMSW like myself, or a social worker, or a counselor, or someone who has a PhD or a psychology degree, to partner them together to also facilitate these groups, because we believe that if you have a good heart and if you have proper training and if you can engage and if you know all the ins and outs of sexual assault, then and you bring that very special story of being a survivor to the room, then why can't that be transformative for others? If you can transform your own life, then you can help transform others. And so we're really clear about creating that kind of environment. It takes work, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. And I didn't mean to get totally off the subject, but one of the things that I think SASHA Center spends a lot of time talking about is making sure that we aren't using language that is victim blaming, that we don't use language that ostracizes people, that we don't use any kind of process or procedure that would make a person feel silenced or make a person feel like this is not for them. We try to create that. It's not a perfect world, but we work at it every single day, and we learn as we go, because it takes survivors to come and educate us as well.
Let me ask you this. What have you learned from working with the NFL and the NBA? Because you're working, if I read correctly, with some rookies.
I work with the rookies. I train all of the rookies in the NBA that after the draft at the Rookie Transition Program, which happened about 2 weeks ago. And I've been doing that for the last 4 years with the National Basketball Association. I've been training the Detroit Lions rookies on intimate partner violence and sexual assault issues for the last 7 years. So I've been a consultant for them for many years. One of the things that I've learned, and I always share this in all avenues and venues, is that most men don't do this. Most men don't believe in violence against women. Most men actually don't support it, or they don't condone it. They just don't like it. And they would never do it. That's what I've learned. But what I also have learned is that men, good, well-meaning men who would never do this, don't have the skills to engage men who are. And so when I navigate spaces where I'm with a lot of men, I'm looking for that well-meaning guy in the room who has leadership skills, who has impression, who has influence, to give them the language and give them the training and understanding about violence against women. What I also know is that when we look at the crime statistics, primarily men are doing this. And I've learned that primarily some men just want to reserve the right to be able to have power and control over women. I know that sexual assault, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence is about power and control, and that it starts well before the first hit ever happens, and that hitting is really the outwardly expression of some other stuff that was going on well before. I've learned that there's a huge inequality around the expectations of men and women. I also know and believe, and they didn't teach me this particularly, but I observed it as I've been doing the work, that to whom much is given, much is required. And so while we might have a mailman, not that that's a bad job or a menial job or anything like that, but you might have somebody working at Ford Motor Company that can make their wives' faces look like hamburger meat on Friday and go back to work on Monday. That is not the same luxury that men in the NFL and the NBA have, especially in the NBA, because their faces are apparent and available and visible. With football, a player can navigate in spaces and people not even know who he is because of the helmet and because, the NFL really is the brand. And basically, the bottom line is if they don't understand the inequalities based on being born boy or girl in the beginning, then they're not going to hear the rest of the message. And they can't hear the message if I walk in the room and I say, you know you can do this, and the bottom line is that sometimes men just don't even want to accept the fact, or it's difficult for them to process that there are other people like them that have this capacity to do these kinds of things. But I also know that there's a lot of pressure for players to have to really walk the line. But at the end of the day, the dilemma is you teach these men how to be extremely aggressive and competitive and to win everything all the time, and then you expect for them to turn that off when they're off the field or off the court. And a lot of times that's a struggle, and they need support. I believe in restorative justice. I believe that everybody has a right to get better, everybody. But if you have not did the thing that I call, taking accountability, showing action that you're going to do something different, and remorse, then there's more work to be done. And to be able to take that accountability is so important. And women, while we've been doing anti-rape movement work for years, men can actually stop rape too, if they have the right language and if they can talk to one another and if they stand up, and if they not just man up but stand up and be not just a bystander but an upstander, and understand and know that women and girls deserve to be respected, protected, loved, and revered in all situations at all times. And those are the kind of things I've learned. I've learned that there's a society out there, and there's this big world out there that exists that keeps men from showing emotion, keeps men from being able to express themselves in ways, because people will call them female-like or woman-like, or these kind of things, which devalue women too. When you call a man a fag or a sissy, or that kind of stuff, and you're devaluing women when you do that. And I don't think that men have been exposed long enough to that kind of dialogue to feel safe. And I always tell the players, it's not what they call you, it's what you answer to, and who do you have to answer to. And when you think about your mother, your daughter, your sister, one of your best friends, your auntie, your cousin, don't think that all women deserve to be treated this way, because you wouldn't want that to happen to your own women in your own life, would you? You gotta ask those kinds of questions.
Have you had the opportunity to deal with an actual situation that is going on? Or do you attend the training camps and speak, or do you work interactively?
I'm very interactive. I actually provide feedback to commissioners and things of that nature. So if there is a case that comes up, they will ask for my advice, and I give it.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You wrote a paper on African American women and violence, and so
with Dr. Carolyn. Yes, yeah, the VAWA paper you're talking about?
Tell us about it. Tell us what you learned.
Sexual violence in the lives of African American women. The article that I wrote was a actual revamp of an original article by Dr. Carolyn, and Carolyn contacted me to ask me to assist by talking about what I've learned from doing groups with African American women in the past 5 years since SASHA Center was founded. What I do know is that sexual violence in the lives of black women, we're still in great need of an anti-rape movement as a group of women, period, because violence against us is so silent. And it really started from slavery. We talk about slavery a lot in that paper. One of the things that we talk about is that when we were brought here, we were chattel. We didn't have the right to say whether or not we could have sex or not want to have sex. And you know that sometimes black women not having dominion over their own bodies was about money, because black women couldn't deny sex, especially if a slave master, for instance, were trying to make more slaves when the slave trade to bring slaves from Africa became illegal. And we also know that in that paper we talked about it, that in the research of any lynching that was done by any man. We know lynching was incredibly wrong, and we know that lynching was used as a method of power control over black folks in general, but we also know that there was never ever a lynching in this country done for the rape of a black woman. We know that all lynchings were related to rape of white women, which also added to our devaluing. We also know that through studies by other researchers that black women who are sexually assaulted tend to have more physical violence and evidence of more physical trauma, and as a result of that, black women resort to self-medicating in a way that is not healthy, such as using substance abuse, or substance abuse is directly related to that. We also talk about the dance culture and how a lot of women who are dancers at these men's clubs and gentlemen's clubs also have sexual abuse and sexual assault in their history and in their past. We also talked about the resilience of black women. Black women are not all the same. We're monolithic. We come in many shapes, sizes, educational backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, and many different genders and expressions of gender and orientation. And as a result, what we found in that study is that we're just much more at risk of being sexually assaulted, and then when sexually assaulted, much more at risk of not ever having anything done about it legally, and or not even being able to reach out to get help, because we do know also there's a stigma in our community of going to seek counseling. There's a stigma in our community of therapy, and that's why SASHA Center kind of developed itself the way we did in terms of doing group, because what we do know is that black women and we've learned are like not gonna come in a room and sit in a circle and just look at each other and talk. They'd be like, what else are we doing? You know, can we help somebody while we sitting here? You know, and that's real, right? So why pretend like we can't do that? So we have groups that happen in urban gardens where we help urban communities around gardening. We have groups that involve creating opportunities to write and share our writings with people. We have groups that we just hula hoop. You know, we have a hula hoop. You know, and the group actually is called shh, shh, like the sound of the hula hoop. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to spell it, but we know that's the sound of the beads, right? Going around the hula hoop. And the trick is our hula hoops don't have any beads because we want people to learn their own rhythms. But we also know traditionally that that's a grounding exercise for people who've experienced trauma, because a lot of times survivors of sexual assault of all kind don't live in their bodies. You know, they go through a whole day and not even recognize they may have bumped themselves or something like that because they're not even living in their bodies. And to have a hula hoop going around your hips, you know, orientates you back to your body. In order to get a hula hoop to go around, you got to stay grounded. Your feet got to be planted, right? And you got to move, you know. So we are very non-traditional in that way, or traditional, however you want to word it, in that way, on purpose, because we know that in our communities there's a lack of trust of traditional therapy in that way. And so we don't apologize for it. We just show up and see where we can go from there. We actually have a poetry group that starts tomorrow. It's free and it's open to the public, and all they have to do is call to pre-register. And the seats are limited though, so once we get to 12 participants, we'll close that group. But we also have a group coming up in September on the 17th in an urban garden. We have a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with Earthworks and Capuchin Soup Kitchen, and they have a hoop house, and we're asking survivors of sexual assault to sign up, pre-register, and meet us there. And what we do in that group is we ask a critical question towards integration and healing, whatever that looks like for them, on sexual assault. And then we do the gardening, and we ask them to think about it, and we keep them on topic. If they start talking about scandal or something, we'll be like, okay, that's cool, but what about the question we just asked? And then we form a circle after we've done the work, and the work is always related to the question. So like one of the things that we do is we start with these beds that have all kind of junk and weeds in them, and the first activity is to clean that out, because you can't put anything good into something when there's junk there. You got to move all that stuff out the way. So anyway, I could go on and on talking about that.
No, because when you were talking about the garden, and I kill everything. So,
I know, me too.
So I don't do gardening, but
yeah.
What I thought about was when you're gardening and things come from a seed.
Yes.
And it's like their lives coming from a seed and just evolving and growing and just as the seed. So if you plant this seed, if I planted this flower and watched it grow and blossom, you're watching yourself grow and blossom. So when that rose comes out at the end, there's your aha moment that you have grown into that rose.
Exactly, and there's a whole lot of metaphors like that in our work, intentionally, and in particular, strawberries grow really fast, and we're out the season for strawberries. But that's why we're partnering with Earthworks, because I'll kill a plant too. But they have one person that they have identified as a survivor who will work with us around what to do, what to plant, how long to expect for it. So they already have in mind what seeds we need to plant and what will manifest within a certain amount of weeks. And sometimes that's other stuff, or like just harvesting, so here is the fruits of all of our labor, and here is the fruits of your labor of trying to integrate these traumatic experiences, because we're not our traumatic experiences. We're really not. We're so much more than that. We're so much bigger than that. But sometimes we just need a reminder, and sometimes we just need to not feel alone and isolated, and that's why we only concentrate in doing groups. So,
and see, that made me think about first fruits.
Oh yeah,
and giving praise and per season.
Yep.
The first fruits, and then evolving and just the evolution of things.
Yes.
So as you speak, I just kind of little things pop into my mind, and I'll share them with you as they pop. Because I wouldn't want to have a senior moment and not hit it.
Oh, no, that's right. I'm right there with you. The thing about it is, we're always looking for, at SASHA Center, women of color leadership. We're always looking for women of color who have found their own way to healing. One of the things we always talk about, and I always ask that, I always talk about like Maya Angelou, and imagine if she had stayed silent and not said anything about her sexual assaults. We wouldn't have a poet laureate, we wouldn't have phenomenal woman, we wouldn't have all these wonderful things. Oprah wouldn't have had this second mom if she had remained silent. And so I want everybody to find within themselves whatever it is that they need, so that they don't wither, and so that they can manifest whatever it is that God intended for them to manifest is theirs to have. And I believe that each and every person who's experienced rape and sexual assault deserves that opportunity. I had a survivor tell me once, I just want to be able to read a book without interrupting thoughts of my father touching me. And I'll never forget her saying that. And I thought about that for a long time, and I said, well, if we could teach her how to deal with the triggers, because it's not going to ever go away, and there could be triggers from a smell, a way a person looks or walks, or a particular area, or a particular kind of car, or a particular word someone says could take you right back to the day you were assaulted. But if we could get her through that and get her past those triggers, she could read 2 books. She could read to her children.
She could become a librarian.
She can go to college.
Yeah, there's so many things.
She could change life. She had the motivation to read. She just needed the tools to get through it. And that's what SASHA Center is. We believe in creating safe spaces for women to find the tools that they need to get through it.
What are the characteristics, what are the signs, what are the triggers that women need to look for, or identify more?
Well, one of the things, it's really interesting that you asked that question, because it depends on when the sexual assault happened, because there are cycles. So if a sexual assault has just happened, we as advocates always remind them, no, you're not going crazy, but they may think they're going crazy because they may have nightmares, or they not be able to sleep, or their eating habits may change. They either may eat a lot or eat less, or they may have outbursts of crying or no crying at all. The neurobiological responses to trauma makes people look very different in very different ways, and I can give you some references about where to look at that more. but there is no particular sign or symptom that someone would have. But if you just have this uneasy feeling about it, and if you have this extreme amount of shame and guilt, if you find yourself walking around making decisions about your life based on what you think you're not or what you think you can't do, those are all reasons enough to reach out and call. If you're having repeated thoughts and ideas about, or like if the assault is playing in your head like a record, like a broken record over and over and over again, and you just can't shake it, those are the kind of things you need to think about in terms of reaching out to get help, to talk more about it. I think, am I answering your question? Am I getting to where you're trying to?
I wanted to look more at, and that's valuable information for people that are looking at someone that, you know, that are, if you're changing of habits and those kind of things, and we always want to do that. So if you have a friend, say, that's been sexually assaulted and they haven't been talking about it, but in the relationship, say you meet somebody.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. And you're trying to, it's questionable. You know, you like this person, but this person is a bit controlling.
Oh, I see.
You see where we're going?
So we're switching gears a little bit, because I know one of the things I'm really deliberate about is I'm always saying that I'm a sexual assault advocate, and I talk about sexual assault, but I also do domestic violence a lot. And I've done domestic violence for many, many years. We know that sexual assault can happen in the context of a date or in the context of a marriage. And SASHA Center is specifically trying to address sexual assault because it's so easy for us not to talk about rape. And you've been doing a great job. The sessions you've had before, and even with me, I really appreciate this, because rarely do we ever get to talk about rape or sexual assault. And what's really interesting is sometimes when I talk to leaders in our community and I say rape and sexual assault, they'll say, oh yeah, domestic violence is a horrible thing. And those really are not the same. But if you want to switch gears and talk a little bit more about domestic violence, we can do that. What needs to happen when you're with someone and you think that there may be a problem or an issue that's coming up, you want to look at what are their initial ideas about women in general, or about people that they're in relationships in general. Like, do they have these overcasting ideas that women have these specific roles that they're supposed to play? For instance, no, I only take out the trash because I'm a man and that's what I'm supposed to do. Or no, you're the woman, you wash the dishes and you make sure the baby is changed and all. I don't do that because I'm a man. If they have those really strong ideas about that, then you might be slipping on a slippery slope a little bit, and you want to kind of check in. If that person is very controlling, doesn't like your family, doesn't like your friends, doesn't want you around anybody, if they use tactics to try to control you, such as the children, if they are putting you on a budget, but they're not on a budget, we talk a lot about that with the athletes in particular, but if they are condescending in their conversations, or if they're name calling, or if they don't want you to have access to certain information, you just really have to be clear. And so it's real tricky, because like I spent some time talking to a young couple once, high school couple actually, and he was a basketball player, and he asked, not a professional player, but a high school player, and he asked her to wear his Letterman jacket every day. And he didn't care if it was 98 degrees outside. You need to have a jacket on. And so she liked him, and she wanted to be with him, and so she tried to please him by wearing his jacket every day, even when it was 98 degrees outside. But really what she didn't recognize is that he was marking her. And what she didn't recognize is that that was his way of telling everybody else that she was his property, and then also not really caring about her well-being, being hot. And so you have to ask those questions. So is this man picking you up every day from work because he wants to make sure you don't catch the bus home, or is he picking you up every day from work because he's clocking your time? You have to ask those questions, and you have to be real clear, and you have to communicate that. And some of this stuff is not arrestable. You know, some things that happen that creates these dangerous situations for women start with stuff that you can't call the police about. So you got it, because no one's going to arrest anybody. But I also say this about men too, because men can be survivors of domestic violence, and men also can be sexually assaulted. I had a male cousin who was murdered by his girlfriend, and she never spent a day in jail, which is another one of the motivations I have for doing this work. they have to look out for signs too, and it's all about power and control. And there's a Duluth model called the power and control wheel. I'm sure some of that has come up in your interviews, but the Duluth model power and control wheel talks about using male privilege, using the children, using isolation, name calling, playing mind games, doing economic and using economic control. All of that stuff happens well before sexual abuse or physical abuse happens, and we just have to be able to see it. And when you see it, you have to be critical about what it is that you want to do to take steps to be safer.
And see, and that's why we went to that place, because I believe that if you can harness and stop the relationship before, during these periods, that we may not get to the sexual assault or the sexual abuse in some relationships. What is the difference? Because I want to talk about the difference in sentencing for crimes against African American women and the general population.
That's a deep question. I don't know if I can address that, but it sounds like what I hear you saying is that there is a propensity for black women to have to do more time when...
No.
Help me understand.
Okay. When there is, just like if there's black on black crime, then you're going to serve less time in jail for the most part.
Oh yeah, okay.
So if there's a sexual assault against a black woman and she reports that crime, is there a propensity, a difference in the sentencing as opposed to a white male that sexually assaults?
What we have found in the research, and I understand what you're asking me, and what we have found when we look at the crime statistics, is that it tends to, black women's cases tend to never make it to court. That's what we found. So it's even more pronounced because it never makes it that far. When you think about the Duke Lacrosse case, where these white males were accused of raping this black female, just because she dropped the charges did not mean it didn't happen.
Right.
And the bottom line is that as long as black women are treated like they're unrapeable, then the likelihood of black women coming forward is going to continue to be less than even when white women come forward. Because I'll tell you, when we run our groups, we don't say just black women can come. Anybody can come, but we let them know that we're African-centered, and that means that we talk about it from an African-American perspective, which also means that we talk about some of the stuff we talked about earlier, including slavery, including Jim Crow, including racism and oppression and discrimination. Those things all play a part in how women experience rape in this country and in this culture. And so when white women want to join our groups, we let them know that well in advance. And they say sometimes they can hang in there, and there's some women, white women, that come in the room and they hang and they do good. But there are some white women that come in the room and say, well, I just don't get it. And it's like, well, you wouldn't get it because when you got raped and you made a report, somebody got arrested and somebody went to jail and somebody paid for it and somebody believed you. Maybe the third time around, somebody believed you. But black women, they don't believe them the first time around. And so when we talk about cases like even with Bill Cosby, being that he committed these sexual assaults. I mean, I always say where there's smoke, there's fire, and now we have more information and data that says that he has drugged women and had sex with them, and if you're under the influence of drugs, you can't consent, and that consent is a very clear thing that we have to keep teaching people. But the other piece about that is that even in that story, I've only heard primarily from the white women. I haven't really heard from the Beverly Johnsons as much. And the other women of color, even a woman of color from Detroit, black woman from Detroit, mixed race black woman from Detroit that was sexually assaulted by a Bill. Very rarely do you hear their stories. Very rarely do you see their faces, because it's almost like, who are we? We can't even talk about it because it's not really happening to you. You know, and I've had, I mean, I know you asked about the criminal piece, and I really want to stay away from that because I'm not as statistically prepared to answer that question.
That's fine.
But I want to say this, that what I do know is that there was a person who's in hip-hop. I used to be a rapper. I was a rapper in Detroit. and opened up for many bigger artists when I was younger. As a matter of fact, that's why my mother made me go to college when I told her. Anyway, long story. But at any rate, I contacted an MC that I knew from back in the day for something, and he asked me what I had been doing, and I told him starting SASHA Center, and he said, for black women, what do you mean? Black women ain't getting raped. They ain't been raped since slavery time, and if they are saying they're being raped, they're lying. And this is just an automatic response from another black man about us. And I was just like, how can you possibly say that? And I said, you have a teenage daughter. You should ask her if she knows anybody who's been sexually assaulted. And then he said, well, it better not be her, because then I will go. Then he jumped in his man box talking about who all he was going to kill. And I said, well, you know, that's really not reality, and you really need to think about it from that perspective. But we all know that race is a construct, and that race is the thing that may keep people from thinking certain people should be punished more or not, whether or not some people have a voice or not, whether or not something's happening to someone or not. But my question is, especially around rape and sexual assault and intimate partner violence, domestic violence too, is that, like, where is the outrage? I mean, I used to be a rapper, but my mother told me when I wanted to rap, if you can't say it in this living room, you can't say it outside. And then when I listen to hip hop today, it's just like we're being raped over and over and over again in songs, and babies are singing it, and it's okay. And so, you know, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do around changing attitudes and behaviors and thoughts about black women. I think that we need to be sacred, safe, and revered, like I said, in all situations, and that's not the case right now. And we're at risk of being assaulted, but we're also at risk of never being able to manifest our full selves if we don't stand up and reach up and help one another and embrace one another and try to figure out a way to heal. To get on that journey. Who knows what healing actually looks like? We're always on a journey. I have good days, I have bad days, I have days when I can't do anything but just engage in some kind of self-care for myself, or, you know, reach out and get help, you know, and talk to somebody and say, hey, you know, today was a rough day, or, you know, a survivor came and her story sounded just like mine, and today I'm just feeling icky. I just need to go sit down somewhere, meditate, pray, light a candle, burn some incense or some sage, or I smudge myself. I had to do something. But these are tools, and there's so many tools that black women have that haven't been exposed yet, that are just on the, we're just getting to it, and we're going to continue to do the work. I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question. But
no, you did. And human trafficking and our children. And what do we do?
Human trafficking, honestly, for me, is the new buzzword for funding. It's been happening for years. It's been happening for a long time. It's the new day slavery. It's inappropriate. I don't service children. I think that that's a specialty for folks who service children. We should be outraged about that as well. I also think that human trafficking language can get away from the black woman that I see before me, who is being trafficked at home, who is being trafficked in her neighborhood. At SASHA Center, we service people who've been sexually assaulted in any context. It doesn't matter if it's in trade related to human trafficking, or trade related to labor, or if it's related to somebody you know at college, somebody on your block, a stranger, a college professor. We don't care how it happens. If you are somebody who did not consent to sex, then we service you. But in terms of human trafficking, I think that there are lots of folks that are professing and also specializing in human trafficking. At SASHA Center, we don't yet, because we don't have funding for it, but there is some stuff coming down the line that we may be able to engage in terms of helping survivors who've been sexually assaulted in the context of human trafficking. Any sex, in my opinion, that happens in the context of human trafficking is sexual assault, because they're forced in that situation, be it some person making them do it, be it that they're doing it in order to live, to survive, to eat. Those are not options. That's not consent. That's force, when you have to do it in that way.
And I know you can't put everybody, and everybody is not inclusive of a certain group, and you've talked about that. So if someone is wanting to come to your sessions, are they free?
Yes. They're all free and confidential. And we have one particular group that's open, which is a bit of a challenge for us to manage, but we do really well. We haven't had any issues. But on Wednesday nights from 6 to 8, we invite the entire community to come to our center to talk about rape in our community. It could be talking about a situation that just happened on the west side. It could be about a sexual assault that happened in the context of the poetry community. It could be Bill Cosby. It could be talking about how to be safer on the internet. We just had a 4-session discussion about Dinah and Tamar from the Bible, who were sexually assaulted. We talk about all of these different topics, and we use that as a feeder into our closed groups. And our closed groups, like I said, we have going on that are coming up is that people just call and let us know if they're interested, and then they sign up, and then we tell them where to go to meet us at that particular place. And then we also have MOUs with Covenant House, Pathways Academy, Salvation Army, and we go into those spaces where women are who are already identified as survivors and do groups in that context too. And then we're also doing and developing a support group for survivors whose rape kits were never examined or tested. And anybody can call our agency and see what we have going on at any particular time. But the reason why we have that Wednesday group is that we don't want our closed sessions to be closed and they can't get into those. We'll always have something every week for somebody to drop in if they want to talk about their lives as it relates to how it's been impacted because they were sexually assaulted.
Okay, go back. What is the MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding, which is just like an agreement. So we all decided we're going to play together, you know, and work together to try to impact survivors, because what we know is that there's so much guilt and shame and negative connotations around rape and sexual assault that people aren't just going to pick up the phone and say, hey, I want to come in and talk. So we have to create and be creative about how do we engage community to talk about it.
Okay, so we know this. We know that SASHA Center is a nonprofit.
Yes, it is.
And so we know that you depend on funding,
yes,
donations,
yes,
and those kind of things. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about how you donate to the group. And I know I put the SASHA Center, I put all the information on my website, www.claudettemilner.com, and I also put a note, please donate this, because
thank you.
So how does one donate?
Sure.
And
okay, so one of the ways that they can donate is they can go to our website, www.sashacenter.org, and there's a donate button right there. It's a GoFundMe account and a regular PayPal donate button. They can press it and donate any amount. Any amount will do. To run a 6-week group, it costs us anywhere between $2,000 and $4,500 to run, and that includes rental space, supplies, journals, books, paper, snacks, and paying of the facilitators. And transportation and all of that, because we also offer bus tickets for survivors who want to come. So we're always looking to have donations provided, and they can also call our 800 number, which is 888-865. What is the rest of the number? Oh my God, 888-865-7055. Sorry about that. 888-865-7055 is our number that they can call directly, or if they want to call locally, it's 313-214-2083. That's 313-214-2083. They can also mail it to us. They can call us and we'll come pick it up, whatever it is that they want to do. And we also look for donations of gently used purses, because we have a big fundraiser on Good Friday evening where we sell purses, and it's called the Poets and Purses Party. So if people have gently used high-end purses that they want to donate to us, we'll take those as well.
Okay. I'm being cued. I want to say thank you so much for coming, for being on the show, for participating, for being transparent. And of course, in the next topic that we're going to deal with is going to be immigration. So if you want to answer out or speak out to Donald Trump or any of the other candidates, please contact the network or contact me at www.claudettemilner.com. We're going to do a 4-week series. Hopefully we can get the candidates to actually say what they know and know what they say. Again, this is Claudette Milner, host of A Matter of Interpretation. And as always, my efforts plus God's grace. You have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.